leg swelling, edema. Here are 5 keys to reduce leg swelling and edema right now. Let's go. So there's a fluid balance inside of your body. And if this balance gets off, it starts backing up in the extremities furthest away from the heart. There are no pumps to get that fluid back that run automatically. So it's not like blood flow where it has a large pump, your heart, to boom, 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 and get that fresh blood to every area, every extremity of your body. Once it's used and it's got to come back to the heart in the form of the veins, it relies on movement in order to get that back, and it relies on osmosis to get that back. If you remember that big word, maybe back in the day in middle school, right? And that's the balance of what particles are in the fluid as well as how thick the fluid is, okay? So these are concepts that make a big difference when it comes to swelling and edema, especially in the legs, okay? So if we don't pump it back to the heart, or if we get the weight of that fluid too bogged down, it doesn't make it back and it ends up backing up into our system. My dad dealt with this a lot. My grandfather dealt with this a lot. The fluid balance relies on 2 things. One is going to be movement. Movement activates the venous pumps, the pumps that are going to drive the fluid back up your legs to your heart, your lymph system back up to your heart, so it can be re-cleansed, refreshed, ran through the lungs, and used again. If you're not moving, if you're restricted on moving, then you're going to have more pooling that's going to happen. So that's concept number 1 of what's affecting the swelling and the edema. Number 2 is the balance of those minerals and the balance of the molecules in the blood. The main ones, salt and potassium. Now, salt is going to be demonized by most, but people have, this is 2 distinct things. If you have way too little salt in your body, you are at severe risk of heart problems. If you have way too much processed salt in your body, you are at severe risk for heart problems. You've got to be right in the middle. Most don't know if you get too little salt, you're going to have a lot of problems with fluids and heart issues. If you get too much, you might be retaining a lot of fluid. So your focus there is to cut out the processed salts, have healthy salt, and make sure you get enough potassium. Potassium is going to be the thing that's going to balance out the sodium inside your system. It's going to be very crucial for the balance of the fluid movement in the tissues or in the blood, And potassium and sodium are the gates that are going to move that fluid around. The other factor here that a lot of people miss is insulin. Insulin is also a molecule that acts like sodium and like potassium and controls the movement of fluid in your body. So the higher insulin is, the more fluid retention we're going to have. Now, if you started a low sugar approach, a keto approach, a paleo approach, and you dropped your insulin levels, a lot of times what you'll experience, or maybe you've done fasting before, you get cold, right? Why is that? Well, the fluid's changing inside your extremities. The blood flow is changing inside your extremities because now that insulin molecule is gone, the fluid moves from the tissues into the blood or from the blood into the tissues, and then you get cold because you don't have as good a blood flow because it's changing the fluids, you see? So we're going to use those concepts, that background, to give you these 5 solutions. So let's break them down. Number 1, lower insulin. Lowering insulin is going to make a huge impact on the swelling inside of your body, especially inside of your legs. What does that mean? You've got to get sugar and anything that contains sugar and or spikes insulin out of your system. So you need an insulin-friendly lifestyle. So when I talk about this, there's some shocking foods that people are like, I thought that food was healthy for you. It's not a matter just if the food is healthy, which we want to eat real food. But we also have to go one layer deeper and say, okay, we can't eat all healthy foods because we have to be very aware of whether or not that food spikes insulin. So for a period of time, in order to get your insulin down, it's sort of like coming off a drug or of alcohol. You've got to get it completely out of your system so you break the addiction inside of your body, and your body has the ability to repair from that substance being in there way too much. So of course, the obvious carbohydrates and breads and crackers and grains. But then you look at rice, and you look at fruits, and you look at honey, and you look, all of these things spike insulin levels. So we've got to be very tuned in to what is going to spike insulin and have an insulin-friendly lifestyle. That is huge for a ton of conditions, but especially when it comes to swelling, lowering your insulin. The Living Good Daily book gives you a breakdown of this. The Living Good Daily lifestyle helps you apply that insulin-friendly lifestyle. So if you need those, there's a link there. You can check that out. Now, next, number 2, increase potassium. So potassium keeps sodium in balance, okay? It keeps sodium in balance. So we're oftentimes severely lacking potassium. We get a third of what we normally need. We get a third or a half of what our ancestors ate, meaning we don't eat enough fruits and vegetables, and we eat way too much processed foods full of salt. So we're getting way too much processed salt and way too little potassium. You can simply do this by getting green foods inside of your system. Now, I would avoid higher sugar fruits and focus more on vegetables. This is why I love to take greens every single day. You can put it into a greens juice. I put my greens powder into a very low carbohydrate juice, or I take the greens powder straight up, and I get that into my system each day for extra potassium. And it's incredibly important for the alkaline balance in the body. It's incredibly important for antioxidants defense, for free radicals inside your system, but also swelling and fluid balance. Increase potassium. Number 3, electrolytes are also going to be helping you. So this is where you're getting your good healthy salt, but you're also getting things such as potassium and magnesium along with it. Instead of drinking Gatorade, which would be really high in sugar and very toxic, I use an energized powder, and it's electrolyte powder, very important, especially if you are lowering insulin levels and you're cutting out carbohydrates. You've got to increase your electrolytes to keep that fluid balance proper. So potassium has to go up, and make sure you're getting those electrolytes in. Number 4, eat more real salt and less processed salt. Paying attention to the foods in the middle of the store is going to have a lot more salt in it than the foods in the outside of the store. Stay to the outside. That's the processed salt we want to avoid. So yes, it's true, we do want to avoid we do want to avoid salt, but it's the processed salt that's the enemy. It's the table salt that's the enemy. Real salts can still remain and should still remain. We need those minerals, we need those electrolytes. So we use real salt, Celtic, Himalayan sea salts to cook with, and or I put a little bit on the top of my Dr. Living Good coffee each morning, just a little bit of salt to make sure I got my electrolytes in to keep that balance. You do not have to overdo it. You want the healthy form of salt. And then number 5, let's get the pumps in the leg going. You can do this by movement. My favorite for specifically swelling and edema is rebounding. This is a mini trampoline that you can jump on 2 to 5 minutes a day, and you are specifically targeting the calves and the leg muscles to pump that swelling and that fluid back up. Now, you might be slightly immobile. You might struggle. Get one with a handle. Just light jumping. If you have a bad spine, don't jump too high, and get some pumps and get some movement going to get the swelling from the legs back up into the heart. Those 5 ways that you can make a big difference on reducing leg swelling and edema. If you need help with those steps, they're all broken down in the Living Good Daily book. There's a link right there. You can get one for free. Just cover the shipping. There you go.